Google Calendar. Let's look at what the agenda is for today here. So we're going to be looking at something called GET request with AJAX. We're going to talk mainly about AJAX and what it is and how we can use it. And to make network requests to retrieve data from an API or a server. And then you see the content notes over the lesson notes over there. We're also again the usual exit ticket at the end. And hopefully we'll cover everything by midday, and then you will be working in the afternoon in the AJAX lab. Sort of same format. Also, this week, today, we start this assignment, the loading data from APIs assignment, which is going to be a week long, just like the CSS assignment. And this will be what we're introducing you today here. And what you have already seen manipulating the DOM are the two main components you will need for this assignment. And that will be due on a week from there, which will be, I think, the 20th. So here on the 20th, that assignment will be due. So yeah, make sure to check out that. I think I updated the link. It should take some time to appear here. Or also you'll find it in the, wait, this is here. In the due date, you can see the link to the assignment. I also put it in here on the 14th for the start. It's just not appearing yet because this takes a little bit to refresh. Any questions about the plan for today or anything else? Cool. So let's look at GET request with AJAX. Let me just close everything else. Oh yeah, so this is going to be the lab. Now remember that that's linked over there. Okay, so the goals for today are to understand AJAX and how to implement it, what it is, and use XML to make requests. Actually, this is missing, should say XML HTTP request. XML in itself is a data format. Do you guys remember when we saw, actually we're going to get into that. Some of the keywords that we're going to be talking about are AJAX, which is actually a short for asynchronous JavaScript, and XML. XML is the extensible markup language. We're not going to be using a lot of XML because now we have sort of a more modern way of dealing with data, which is JSON, but these two are formats in which you can transmit data, basically. File formats, they're both file formats, but also they will structure with that data gets transmitted internally. And we're gonna put, okay, so we're just gonna learn how to get data from the internet and load it into our pages. So far we've been building HTML sites with CSS, and we put a little bit of JavaScript in to make stuff happen once you click a button. For instance, the Hangman game, or when you hit a key, and that's cool. But essentially, those are static apps. They're not retrieving any outside information. Basically, you code it once, and that will stay like that unless you modify it, and it's not accessing any external information. And the goal for AJAX is to access external information. And I think when I was learning this was actually my favorite part, like loading information from APIs into my websites. So it was a lot of fun. I hope you have fun as well. So yeah, like as I said, so far we've been building sort of like static. The word is like static websites, where the content of the website doesn't change dynamically, right? And that's the way in which websites used to be built. Like you would just create a page for every single every single page that you wanted to show, you will just create an HTML document for every single one, right? And if the user clicked a button and that will change, let's say, for instance, in the hangman game, imagine that when the user puts in a letter and they hit submit or send in the earliest versions, imagine if once you hit submit, the browser will just load an entire new page with the letter replacing the word if they guessed it correctly. So that's like in the old days that it used to be the case where you had to load a separate page every time the user interacted with anything in the website. And JavaScript came to not have to do that, so that we can actually just manipulate the DOM and we don't have to reload the page. But in the old days, again, like you will have to have a different page for every single different action that the user could take on your website. So JavaScript came for the help there. And then lastly, we got AJAX, which will allow us to fetch information so that not only we can we don't need to generate another page for whenever the user hits a button, but we can also like just fetch information from online without having to have the browser refresh or generate an entire new page for that. Actually, I want to show you. Let me just introduce you to AJAX. Again, it stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and the history of asynchronous JavaScript is again what I was telling you about how a new page would need to be sent to the browser for every action. And I really I was looking at this AJAX Wikipedia, and I found a graph that I really like and I wanted to share with you. No, but AJAX programming. So again, I think this is something that we should add to the lecture, which is AJAX is a set of web development techniques. So it's not a single thing. It's a set of web development techniques to create asynchronous web applications. We're gonna have to visit this definition. And here I really like this graph. Let's see if download the original file. No. Oh, but this is kind of hard to see. Yeah. So here we have. Like the old way of doing websites. On the left, so you see like the web browser, right? That's Chrome. The user interface, that's the buttons that the app has, right? And then the web browser and your app, essentially, they will make an HTTP request to a server. The web server is, like the To-Dos API, right? You're sending that request to the To-Dos API, or for that matter, any other API. And for instance, in the To-Dos API, when you create a new to-do, that to-do gets saved to a database. And the database is a permanent data storage, right? So that to-do will remain in that database until either I, the developer of the API, or you, that has the power to delete to-dos, delete it, right? But under most web servers, there is a database that stores information permanently. But anyway, so here we can see that the user will create a HTTP request by clicking on a button or refreshing the page, and the browser replies back. The browser replies back with HTML and CSS data. So this was before like JavaScript, right? And then the browser just knows how to display HTML and CSS. Not a very dynamic web app. And then on this right side, we have sort of the same, similar model, but actually totally different. We have the web browser. We still have the user interface. And we have a AJAX engine or a JavaScript engine. And this is a part of the web browser that understands JavaScript and knows how to execute JavaScript, knows how to call functions, etc. And then the user interface, this is more like what you have, which is the user interface. When the user clicks a button, it makes a JavaScript call. We could call it that. It makes a JavaScript call to a function, say, add new to do, or in the case of the hangman game, like check user input. When the user clicks a button in the user interface, that JavaScript call gets sent. And then so far, like this JavaScript call has not, in what we have been building, has not gone to a web server to retrieve external data. That's what we're going to learn today. So far, it just like executes the data and then it feeds back the data by doing DOM manipulation, right? Now, what we're going to do today is make that JavaScript call, right? The JavaScript engine sees that call and then it makes, or this JavaScript engine is what we're going to be getting to see today. Makes an HTTP request, send that to the server, and then the server understands the request. In here, it's a web server and or XML server. The server sees your request coming in, and then it replies back with either XML, HTML, or JavaScript data. In this case, even JSON data. And it will reply back with that data, and then you receive it, and then you can display it. So this is sort of a high overview graphic of what we're going to be doing today. Questions so far? I think, let me see if I could. Here. Here. Read this part whenever you have time. Yeah, each user action required in the 1990s, each user action required that a complete new page be loaded from the server. That process was inefficient, as reflected by the user experience. Imagine like posting a message on Facebook and the entire page had to load all over again. Probably won't have that many users. Yeah, like look at this part. All the content, each time the browser reloaded a page because of a partial change, like changing a letter in the web hangman, all the content had to be resent, even though only some of the information had changed. And this is what we want to, this is what we're going to learn how to avoid using AJAX. Yes, Peter?
Is that why, like, when we started working with buttons, we had to prevent the default of it, the default of the interactions to reset it?
That's correct. Yeah, that's a good example. Like, for when you have a form and you have a submit button, when you don't prevent the default, what that button will try to do is load a different page that has the information. Well, load a different page, and I'll also send the information to the server. Send the form information to the server. Yes, that's a good example. That's the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. So AJAX is here so that if something changes, if we want to fetch information dynamically, and that information changes the content of our website, we don't have to reload the entire website again. You can just change stuff. Okay, so asynchronous. Let's look at the definition of this word. So, of two or more objects or events not existing or happening at the same time. I think chronos. That comes from chronos, which I think is a Greek personification of time. That's where the word comes from. Also, in Spanish, we have this word cronómetro, which means timer. And so that's sort of time, and asynchronous means like not existing or not happening at the same time. Oh, actually, I think this might be confusing at some point, but so asynchronous JavaScript, if you can remember something from asynchronous, is think of in an event that happens in JavaScript that will take some time, that might take some time, like loading data from the server, and that it may fail. Because let's say if we send that network request to a server and the server is down, then the network request will fail, right? But think about asynchronous as stuff that we will create with JavaScript that can take some time. We don't know how long it will take, and it also could fail. And we want this because imagine if you have a website and you're getting information from the To-Dos API, and you want to display that information on your website. Imagine if the user couldn't see anything on the page until that information arrives. Right? What you want is, have you seen like YouTube, the app, or even I think Facebook, all those apps that when you open it, it shows you some like placeholders where the information will go. Have you seen that? So that is to improve something called perceived user experience. Right? You want to display something to the user as soon as possible, because if not, then the user might get bored and go away to a different app. So imagine what we want with asynchronous JavaScript is to update a web page without reloading, request data from a server after the page has loaded, receive data from the server, and send data to a server. And all of this also, we want all of this to sort of happen in the background. We don't want to like show a blank page to the user, and then after that, we don't want to show a blank page like having the user waiting for the information. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't want a blank page or a frozen page waiting for information to arrive. And asynchronous JavaScript will allow us to do stuff sort of in the background, so that the page is still displaying the content, and in the meantime, in the background, we will be fetching information from a server. A very common use of AJAX is to interact with the RESTful API through a web app. To actually make a call to get data, we will use the class XML HTTP request. Okay, so, I forgot to mention the XML part. So, asynchronous JavaScript, think about JavaScript that sort of runs in the background. It actually doesn't run in the background, but we can think of it as running in the background. That will allow us to do sort of like, for the user, it will look like doing two things at the same time, where we can have the page display, and in the meantime, in the background, we're retrieving information. And the XML part is it's just that in the early days, retrieving data with JavaScript, that data will come in a format called XML. And I think I showed you XML, JSON versus XML. So we're familiar with JSON now, and we can see here this is a JSON example representing an object of employees, and this employees property is holding an array of employees objects, right? So this is what JSON looks like, and the same information can also be represented in XML, and it will look like this. It will look like this. The same information, like John Doe. You can see John Doe here. and we have this tag. I had already shown you this. So it's just that in the early days, XML was more common than JSON, and that's why we have that AJAX.x at the end standing for XML. It's just that because the data was retrieved originally in XML format. I think I was reading on JSON, and it was actually really interesting to see. I think JSON was developed on the earlier 2000s, and then it was standardized only in 2013, which to me that's not that long ago. But yeah, so just keep in mind that XML was sort of the old way in which we used to transmit data, and then JSON came along, and JSON is much more intuitive, at least for us, like JavaScript developers. In fact, like JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So the JSON idea came from when you console log an object, it looks technically the same like this. That's where they say, oh, this looks really nice. This could help us transmit data, and then just parse this data and build the object back. So that's what that part in the AJAX means. Okay, so I guess let's get any questions or comments before we get to see an actual example. Cool. Okay, so here we have copied this HTML to an HTML file. I'm gonna go cd core to AJAX. HTML. So here I'm going to touch index.html. And also create a JavaScript file as well. In this case, I'm going to call my two files, index.html and index.js. So I have my two files, and then I'm going to open the current folder that has the two files with my text editor, and I have the two files here on the right. Again, copy this HTML into there. And save it. So also be aware that if you name your JavaScript file something else, you will need to update here the script tag. Yes. No, not yet. Oh, let's copy this. This JavaScript do copy. Okay, everyone has their HTML. The HTML from the lesson copied into the HTML file. And then this JavaScript in as well. Cool. So I want somebody to walk me through what this JavaScript is doing. Or actually, let's do this with whoever is sitting next to you. Talk about what this JavaScript is doing here. Let's take 3 minutes for that. Talk to whoever is sitting next to you about what this JavaScript does. Okay, what did you guys find?
That it's the only thing, the only function it's doing is just check and see if it works.
Okay, yes.
Is that it sets up an event listener for the DOM, so it's not going to run any code before the DOM.
Nice.
Then it defines the button, specifically selecting the load users button defines ID.
Which we have here.
And then it adds an event listener. Once you click, and then it does the function load users, which is defined below that event listener for the DOM. And the function load users simply console logs loading users close to the button lines.
Really good explanation. Yes, this is what that is doing. I don't even want to repeat it because it was great. So here we have added a event listener to the button. If we open this in our browser, which I'll need to do here, we're going to Finder. We can see that actually some of you were looking at this already, which is cool. This is the HTML that is the page that is being generated by that HTML. And here, the only thing is we have added an event listener to our button, and when we click, that will get console log, right? Okay, so was everyone able to appreciate the what the button will do when you click it? Okay, but so this is now that we are seeing sort of APIs, like console logging is not that fun anymore, right? We want this button to do something more. What do you think we want this button to do? Right? So the button was properly labeled, right? It should load 10 random user billets. Like what do we mean by load? What do you think we mean by load? Get. Okay. More than getting. What do we want to do with that information once we get it? Display it, right? So okay, let's learn how to hook up this to a JavaScript that will actually retrieve the users from an API, and then we can think about how we display them. Okay, so let's go back here. So go back to your HTML, and let me close this. So in your JavaScript, we're gonna add something to the load users to be able to actually retrieve the information from the internet or from a URL that we're gonna specify. So for that, first, do you guys remember classes and constructor functions, right? That if we have a class that represents a car and now we want to create an instance of that car, we say like, let my car equal new car, right? It's going to be the same, but with XML HTTP requests. So let's do like, let XML equal new XML HTTP. So XML HTTP request is a class that is available in the browser, globally available. So you don't have to import anything. It's just like console, for instance, the console.log that is always available. XML HTTP request is available in the browser. So this JavaScript is running in the environment of the browser, right? XML HTTP request is not available in Node because that's another environment. And that's one of the nice things about JavaScript is that it runs in different environments. One, it could be Node in my computer, and the other one will be the browser in anybody's computer or mobile phone. So XML is, again, available thanks to the browser. So we create an XML object here. I feel like this is not a good name for XML. I'm gonna do XML HTTP because XML in itself is just the data format, and I think that it describes enough what we're doing here. So just call that XML HTTP request. And then here what happens if we console log this? Let's console log, instead of loading users, let's console log XML HTTP. So I create a new instance of the XML HTTP request class, and I'm trying to console log it. Tell me what you see. This is here. What do you see?
Information on what happened.
Information about what happened.
Requested.
Oh, we're not making the request yet. Here we're just like, it's just like when we have a class car and then we create my car out of that class. This is what we're doing. Like we're just seeing what was created out of that class. So what we're seeing here is an object. You can tell because it has the curly brackets. And what kind of object it is an XML HTTP request object. If we had a car, it will say car here, and we'll have the curly brackets, and inside we'll have like the properties that define our car, like number of seats, color, make, model, all those. But in here, we have an XML HTTP request instance, right? Remember that the whole purpose for objects is to represent the real world, right? So we have this object that if we inspect the inside, has a bunch of properties. It has on abort, on error, on load end, load start, status, timeout, a bunch of different properties that we're gonna get to use. So the object on its own is not very interesting. It just has a bunch of properties. Let's learn how to use it. So what we're going to do is we are going to use, you see how in here, once we inspect it, it has this property called onReadyStateChange. Here, we're going to use this property, onReadyStateChange. What we want is we want to put a function here that will be executing as the state of the request is changing. Also, yeah, we're going to get to see hopefully here. So I'm going to do XML HTTP request that onReadyStateChange. Say equal. And I have to do, we have to do this in the ES5 syntax for reasons that I hopefully will get to see later. It turns out, so XML HTTP request was the first mechanism that was created in the browser for us to load data. Now there are other mechanisms, but we just we have to be familiar with XML just because in case we don't have the others available. So we have this in onReadyStateChange. Let's see. And here we're going to put some code. But even before we put that code, let's do XML dot. So XML HTTP request dot open. So the open is a method that we don't get to see here, but open is a method that will allow us to sort of open a connection to whatever URL we want. So we can see here that here we specify. Let me just close this. Here, also I wanted to show you one thing before that. You can hover over here, and if you're in Visual Studio Code, it's going to show you this really nice description. Use XML HTTP request XHR. Actually, that's the best name for this. XHR. XML HTTP request. So it says use XML HTTP request. Oh, XML. Yeah. Well, we'll see the same. But here, if you're in Visual Studio Code, it tells you use XHR objects to interact with servers. You can retrieve data from a URL without having to do a full page refresh. This enables a web page to update just part of the page without disrupting what the user is doing. That's very important. We don't want to disrupt what the user is doing. Okay, so here we're going to open a connection to a server, and here to the open method, we need to pass in first a method, the method that we want to use for the request. Also, if you're in Visual Studio Code, once you complete this, you do open parentheses. This is why I really like VS Code, because it gives you documentation. Here it says that the first method, we can see the first argument must be a method, and it must be a string. And the second one is something that is going to represent a URL, and it should also be a string. So here we specify what kind of request we want to make, or what method. We do get. And the next argument will be a URL. So here we want to copy this URL. The URL is in quotes, and in this case we're going to use this API, random user. So this is an API, just like the to-dos API, the dogs API. In fact, if we do, I just copy that URL, I'm going to paste it here in my browser. I get back JSON. Make sure, yeah, try that URL in your browser or in Postman or with curl. No, this is the random user. It's in the lesson. Yeah. Try that URL, put it in your browser, and see what you get.
What was it referring to when it said void at the end of?
Void, that means it doesn't return anything.
Okay.
So it's a function that returns undefined. Yeah, Shara?
Would you have changed line 8 to XHR?
Oh, yes, thank you. That's a good catch. Oh, I have...
Yeah, you did.
so let me disable this. Cool, so everyone saw what the URL will give you? It will give you, what is it giving you? What does the JSON represent? Users, correct. And every user has a gender, a name. This is how you may want to represent the user. Name, a title, first and last, a location, and more information about even an email. So this is an API that will get you 10 random users for, let's say you're prototyping an app and you want users in your app, but you're just prototyping, you need something really quick, like this API could help you prototype your users in your app. So okay, so this is what this request will give us, a bunch of random, in this case exactly 10, because we have the results here. Exactly 10 users, and if we go here, I think we can see results here. This is another thing that is nice because of we get this because of the extension that we install. We see that it has 10 items. It also has some information here. Yes.
What is the dot thingy? What is that when you put the two dots at the end? Is there
Column?
column? Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does that change everything to that?
What do you mean by changing everything?
Well, it just makes it shorter. Like I only see like one person.
Oh, wait, that's when you clicked here?
No. In the API, you put the column at the very end.
Here?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, it changes it.
Oh, yeah, but then this is because so this is the server got confused. It couldn't understand. It doesn't understand 10 column, and it just gives you defaults to 1.
Okay.
So this is something in the server side. This is not. Yeah. So here is just the server couldn't understand this number. It couldn't understand 10 column. It gave you just 1. Mm-hmm. Cool. Other questions? Yes, Douglas.
Get a query from no anything.
Oh, that's true. Actually, let's see if we change this. Yeah, the endpoint is just the API. I think we might have just put that slash. But also, I guess it still gave us the same result. So I guess like the endpoint here will be just API. Mm-hmm. Other questions? So okay, we saw what this URL was gonna give us JSON, right? This JSON has 2 properties, results and info. results is an array. We can identify the square brackets. And the second key or property info is an object with the results, page 1, so maybe there is more than one page, and the version of, I think this will be the version of the API, the 1.2 version. Cool, so now let's fetch this information, but not manually typing in, yes, Joanne? No special reason. I feel like just XHR is a more accurate name than XML. Just say that again. Oh, XML. It stands for X. This XML.
No, that's XHR.
Yes, XML, HTTP, and R for request. Sort of an abbreviation of that. Okay, so I just put my URL here in the XML xhr.open get, and the second argument is the URL. Then the last thing that we want to do is send that request, and we do that with xhr.send. Also, let's look at what the documentation will tell us here. So it says send, and we can see all the arguments that we can specify. Optional, that means, you see this question mark here? It means optional. So optionally, we can send a body. That body can be a string, a document, blob, and other types of information. It will return void or undefined in our language. And it says, send initiates the request. The body argument provides the request body, if any, and is ignored if the request method is get or head. We didn't get to see head, but you can just know that it's a different method. Throws an invalid state error, dumb exception, if either state is not open or the send flag is not set. Okay, but here what we can just do is we just know that we need to call this method to actually send the request. Actually, I'm going to comment this out and I'll show you a thing here. So, okay, here I'm going to console log. So inside the onReady state change, let's console log data is arriving. Here I'm going to console log data is arriving inside the function that we have onReady state change. And then we have this. And note that here I commented out the xhr send. Now here I'm going to go to my browser. I'm going to go to the console. I'll actually refresh because we need to refresh here to load the new JavaScript. And I'm going to click this, and it has, we still see the console of the xhr. Let me remove that. Refresh again, and we only see like data is arriving. So actually, this should be like, rather than data is arriving, something like state is changing. So here we can see that every time we click, we have load users. We are invoking this function called load users. And this function in its body is creating an xhr and is adding a function to the onReady state change. And once we click the button, we see that the state is changing. Note here, we are seeing this, the state is changing, because when we do xhr.open, we change the state of the xhr request. In fact, I think, I hope I'm not wrong, I'm going to comment this out and reload the page. Once we click again, now we no longer see our console. That is because, again, the open method in the XHR will change the state of the XML HTTP request. Let's look at what XHR will do again. Well, this is what open is doing. It sets the request method and the request URL. It's changing the state of the request by setting the method that we want to use and by setting the URL that we want to use. So let's just get rid of that. Now we have this. And here, we're not sending the request yet. We're just like sort of doing the prep before we make the request. So yeah, I'm gonna uncomment the open. Now we see the state changing is again. And also, I want to show you here this tab before we move on. So here, this network tab, so far we've been spending time in the console. Go to network tab, and you will see this. So the network tab in the developer tools will allow us to inspect the HTTP requests that a website is making. And we want to inspect this just to see if our request is going out and what we're getting back. For instance, let me do that in here. Let's say this website, which is GitHub. Or let me just open. Let's do the New York Times. So this is the New York Times. If I inspect here, and I go to the network tab, I should see a lot of activity going on. You see all that? Let me refresh and you'll see even more. You see all these things that are popping up here are network requests that the New York Times website is making. And you can see here, you see XHR and fetch. So these are requests, network requests that the New York Times is making just as we're about to do ourselves. And in this case, you can see, for instance, they made this network request, for instance, is an XHR. The status was 200, meaning what does 200 mean in the HTTP status code? Okay. So, and you can see here, for instance, we can see the response. We can see what that request was about. You can see that this is a markets.json file, and it has some JSON inside. Because we don't have the extension here, it doesn't look that nice. But this is actually JSON. We can see like status OK. You can see the start of a array here, etc. But I just wanted to show you the network tab because it's going to be really useful once we start to make network requests. Because sometimes we'll find that we're not getting the data that we want, or we're not getting, well, not the data that we want, but the data that we expect. And the network tab will allow you to inspect your request, see if you're making the request correctly, see what you're getting. Here you can see, actually here in preview and response are the same. Response is like the raw JSON, and preview is a prettier looking JSON. And you can see that we have the indices, there's 3. And here in headers, you will see, well, the headers of the request. You can see where that request was made to. It was made to this URL. What do we recognize from this URL? Two things I heard: API and JSON. Here, it turns out that the New York Times has a content API, and they're fetching this information from this endpoint, and they're fetching exactly the markets.json. You can see that there was a get, and all other information. See, we can even see the IP address. But so this is like on a complicated website that you are gonna get to make. But let's look at our humble website, random users, and let's do like the network tab, right? Let's refresh, and we don't see any network activity, right? Our website is not making any network requests at this time. Yes?
I put something cool on a different website.
Mm-hmm.
When I first loaded it up, it only had like 6 items on it. And I started scrolling down more than
Yeah, that's for instance like on Facebook, for instance, that you have infinite scrolling, right? It's not that those posts are already there. Those posts are loading as you scroll down. So the example that Cameron was talking about, as he started scrolling down, he saw more network activity. That's because those posts are being fetched as the website sees that you're about to get to a place where there's no content. You just make that network request, say, hey, API, give me more content, and the API gives you more content, and it gets plugged in to the page. That's how we get infinite scrolling. Yes? Yeah, sure. So the original name was XML, the one that we have in the lecture notes. But I say XML is not a very good name because XML just means the data format, the XML data format. And here I want to represent something. Here, what I want. So in other words, what I want this variable to hold is not XML. Is not an XML document or XML data. I want this variable to hold an XML HTTP request, which is sort of an agent. Is something that can do stuff. It's not a passive thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Like this is sort of an actor. We want to use this object to do stuff. It's not a variable like num that we just set once to 1. And so, yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? It's we wanna yes.
What it does,
Uh-huh.
when you wrote out the ad, when you wrote out each XML, it had like a little blurb
Oh.
on this, didn't it?
Oh, I think this part.
Yeah, never mind. But I get it.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, here is just that this is a more appropriate name. But here, this doesn't matter. I could call this SFW for full stack web, right? This is just the name of a variable, right? But we want to pick appropriate variable names so that we and more importantly others that might check out our code understand what's going on. Okay, so we create an XXR. We open that. Now let's do this. Uncomment your XXR.send. And then in a hit, while being on the network tab, hit the button. Do we have any network activity now? So here I'm going to click it. And we have our first network request being made. Was everyone able to see this? It's really important you do. So you got days?
7 days.
Yeah.
Where? Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. So, that's because I had it here. So, okay, I guess I should have explained this. So if you have it in all, so here there is like you can filter by what network request, what kind of network request you want to listen for, or you want to monitor for. If you're on all, you will see that you get two things. One is your HTML file, and the other one is your JavaScript file. So I guess this is what most people were looking at, right? Okay, so this will be, we can see that when we click, we actually see the content of our HTML and our JavaScript. And once if we deploy this website, this will be network requests, right? The website will make a network request to fetch the JavaScript and the HTML. But here we can see that like the headers, if we're on headers, we can see that this is not really a URL, right? It says file and just a path to where my file is, right? But here, let's click on XHR so that we only filter for the XHR network request activity. And now we click the button and we get this popping up here. So that is our first network request. We can click on it and we inspect. We see the URL that it was made to. We got 200. So the server URL. We go to response. We got a bunch of JSON here. Let's go to preview. And we got the exact same information that we had in here. Well, actually not the exact same because, well, these are random users, so I probably got different set of users here. But was everyone able to see this? It's really important that you do see this. Peter, what's up? Okay, let's look out as to why. You don't have a send, So the send is the actual thing that will make send the network request, right? Anyone else? That make sure that you're getting this here. Yes.
Question. How do you, from this point, how do you go back to what you see when you refresh the page? Like, it's a weird question, but like, when you refresh the page, hit the button. You see all this, right?
Yeah.
But when you click on the results tab, you can't go back to that. Okay.
Oh yeah, here.
Oh, you sense that. Okay.
Okay, and one more time. Actually, let me give you 2 minutes. Check on whoever is sitting next to you. Make sure that they're seeing the network request. I'm gonna get good water. I couldn't hear. Okay. Okay, everyone was able to see the network request? Thumbs up. Cool, thank you. Okay, so but in here, So we have one good big step, which is being able to make the network request. Our website is making the network request, and we can see it here. But how do we use it, right? So we have to, that's what we're going to see next. Like, how do we use this data? What if I want to display this data in my website? So for that, let's go back to the console. Let's look at a couple things. Let's go back to the console. And we can see this, we can see the console logs that we have left. Now it turns out that we have 4 console logs. State is changing the first time. This is like the open. And then we have 3 more. We're going to see like what this is about. It seems to be that the state of the request is changing 3 times. And let's refresh here. I'm going to click again. And I see the same again. And this state change is changing so fast that it appears to be like all at once there. But here, we just need to know that. So it seems to be that the state of the request changed 4 times. We know the first one, that's when we did open. Let's find out what those others are. So here. That's what this other code will do. So let's do this. In here, inside of this function, we have access to the response property of the XHR request. So let's do this. Console log, comma, this, that, response. So here I'm just like console logging state is changing, and I want another thing next to that, which is this, that, response. I could do this in a separate console log, but I just like having them like that. And so that one console log will console log 2 things. So now go back to your website. And what do we get? JSON, that's correct. We get JSON here. So we saw that was like two state changes. So that means that this second state change, what do you think this second state change is about? We know the first one, that was the open. The second one, what do you suspect? Yes.
The send request itself.
The send request, that's correct. That's the state of the request changed to sent, we could think about. Right? Before the request was open, then the request was sent, and then we have these 2 where we see state changing and we see what Sharar identified correctly as JSON. Right? Okay, so we're able to console log the JSON, but what we want to do is actually use it. Okay, but first of all, was everyone able to see this on their own? Okay, let's get you to see it. Do you have the console log here inside that? Are you doing this, that response here? Are you seeing any of the state changing? It's still the 3? Oh, so that means that this console log is not properly made then. Yeah, check on whoever is next to you. Let's take some time to make sure that everyone is on the same page. What was it? Oh, okay. Spelling mistake, right? Spelling mistakes. I have wasted hours on spelling mistakes. Okay, so when we click that, we see the state is changing and this response is that. And we have we can see that Chrome, it even showed us how big this JSON is. It's 20.3 kilobytes. So it's a considerable amount of JSON. Okay, but here, if we look at this, it turns out that, well, we want to know when the request is done. Like, when is it that we have all the data? And for sort of listening for when the data is ready, we have this property called ready state. So let's do something. Let's do here. I'm going to change this to state, and I'm going to do comma this dot ready state. So I'm going to console log the word state, followed by the this dot ready state property, followed by the this dot response property. Now hit the button again. Oh, well, you will need to refresh the page. Don't forget that. Oh, and to save the file. Don't forget that either. Refresh again, and then I hit. And what do we have now? We have state. So we can see that this dot ready state is 1, then it becomes 2. So 1 is code for open, 2 is code for send, 3 I don't remember, but we can start to think about what 3 means. What do you think, Owen?
This is loading on the download on the lesson.
So in here, I think it says. Oh yeah, here. Oh, got it. Yeah. So yeah, we have here 0 on sent. Oh yeah, I guess we didn't see that one. 1 open, 2 headers received. This is because send was call. 3 loading or downloading the information, and 4 done. So this is what we want. We want to see when the state is 4. I know that I have all my data. Also, you see that how we have like state 3 here, and then we console log this part. And then we have at some point I think we have. Oh, we don't have state 4. Oh yeah, we do have state 4. So look at this for instance. Oh, do we have? Oh. Okay, so we have state 3, which is sort of like the information is being downloaded, and then state 4 is when we actually have the entire information. I think this doesn't show you here, but on state 3, we will have like partial information. We don't have the entire information. It turns out that so behind the scenes, all this JSON is not being transmitted all at once. It gets transmitted in chunks. And those chunks get assembled by the browser into one unit again. So that's like, it doesn't show us here, but I want to see, let's see, what if I do this.response.length? Let's refresh. No, it does look complete. Okay, but the only thing that we need to remember here is that whenever we have state, ready state is equal to 4, that means the request is done. We have all the information, and we want to do something in that case. So for doing that, we are going to be using an if statement to check when this.ready state is equal to 4. You get undefined on what part? This one?
Yeah, when I put like the ready state.
check your spelling here. State is capital S. So ready state. Okay, so we know that when we have ready state 4, we have all the information. We can start processing that information. Maybe here is once we have state 4, is that we want to display the information because we have it complete. So we could do this, and here I'm just gonna do. In fact, I want to do console log request finish. And I only want to do this if the ready state is 4. So say that. Refresh, and then load. We get request finish, state is 4, and we get the results. So we know when the ready state is 4, we have everything we needed. We have everything we requested. Request finish, or I don't know, request finish response arrived. So here, when the state is 4, again, the request is finished, and or the response arrived. Okay, so questions so far? Maybe stuff that's confusing. What can I explain again? Char?
So how does the number like change, like from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4?
Oh, the number is changing. The browser is changing the number as it manages the request. It's sort of hidden to us. So here, instead of hard coding 4 here, they included a state that you could do this dot done, which is a little bit more verbose than trying to remember a number 4. So we do this dot done. I think is this dot done. Let me just verify here. Yeah. This dot done is a a variable or is a property of the XML HTTP request that has the number 4 in it. But it just is easier for us, the developers that are human, to remember done than remembering the number 4. So here, if we have that and we refresh, we should still have the same thing. This is quite a chunk of JSON. Okay, so we know that when ready state is done, we have all the information. And what do we want to do with that information again? Ultimately, display it. So we could display it like this. We could I could just say, here, we could just say document that create element. I'm going to create a p tag, inner text equal this dot response. I'm going to erase this so you don't have to do it. Just sort of for a demonstration. I create a p tag here. And then I do document the body. I want to append it straight to the body. I don't need to grab anything else just because it's straight to the body. Append child p. So here I'm creating a p tag with create element. Immediately after creation, I'm chaining that inner text, and that I want to set the inner text of that newly created p tag to the content of this dot response. What is this dot response again? Owen? The JSON, right? All this content. And then I document that body append child. Let's see what we have. In fact, I don't think we need the console at this point. Refresh. I click the button. Oh, and I don't see anything. So there must be a mistake somewhere. Let's inspect. Hopefully I have an error. If I don't have an error, then fail to execute. Append child of node parameter is not of type node. Oh, that. What is this error trying to say? It's trying to. Yes, Michael.
He's not a
So here, if I look at, so here, I cannot do this at once here. I first need to create the element. Let's look at this here. Like I could do this. Hello. So I'm gonna copy this line. I'm gonna go to the console, paste it here. Let. So here, as Michael's pointed out, p is not an element. When I do that, and I see what p is hello. But I wanted p to be an element, an HTML element. That's why I cannot really do this like that. I will have to do this first. I do this first. So now p is the actual paragraph, and then I could do p.inner text equal hello or anything like that. Instead of hello, what I'm going to do is put the response here. So that was a good catch. Thank you, Michael. So here I have to do p.inner text. P.inner text. Oh, and instead of hello, I want to put in this response. And then lastly, I append that to the body. Refresh here, close the console. We click the button, and we got our beautiful JSON. Look, and even if I click it again, you can see here how my scroll bar is going ever even smaller because I'm fetching another 10 users every single time. Here. So, was everyone able to look at the information in the page? Yes, Owen? You got undefined? You probably, here, do you have, check your spelling in here?
Yeah, I suppose.
Uh-huh. Questions or comments? Yes, Joanne? Your content is less? It's probably check your spelling in here, in the URL. because if we put like 1 here, if we don't have the 0, then we're only going to get 1 user, and it's going to be less than the 10 users that we're currently getting. Okay, thumbs up if you're seeing this in your HTML. Okay, what would be an argument against displaying this information in this way? Ugly. Ugliness. That is a very strong argument. This is not human readable. This is not human consumable. Right? What we want is we want to interpret this information and display it in a more organized way. Display it with HTML elements, so that maybe we put the name in an H tag. In a header, we put the state and the postcode in a paragraph. We just make it look nicer, right? So I don't think, we never want to display like raw JSON to a user. There will be like I think Michael put a photo on that he saw on Netflix. I think some of you saw it, where a pop-up appeared and it was displaying like p tags around the pop-up, right? That's sort of like, we don't want that. That's not a good user experience. We don't want to show this raw JSON. Also, so here, this is JSON, right? And what do you think we're gonna get if we do here, like type of this response? Here I put in my console log, I put type of this dot response, and then I have to open my console here. And I refresh this page. What do you think the type of the response is? Try to guess. Douglas. String. How, like, how do you arrive to that? Yeah, what do you think?
When it threw into a p tag, it wrote into the text.
That's a good reason, right? When we throw this into a p tag, we just saw the text. Let's just verify that it's actually, yes, a string as we suspect. I do refresh, click on it. Oh, I forgot to save. Refresh, hit on it, and we have a string. Right? So, yes, so all network requests, the response that you get back comes in as raw text. There is no, just raw text. Like this is not an object. It's raw text that is formatted in JSON, but it's still raw text. What we need to do is parse this text so that we interpret the JSON so that we can key into the JSON. Or actually, we won't key into the JSON. We will key into the object that we make out of the JSON. So here, so we have, if we go to the network tab, we click on our request, we see how here, this is what we're getting, this raw text. It actually, I think it comes like this. It comes just like one line of raw text. And we can see how when we go to preview, it looks a little bit nicer, right? And we can do like collapse and expand. This is because the browser, Google Chrome, is interpreting this data. It recognizes that the data is JSON. It comes in a format that is recognizable by the browser, and it parses that, and it allows you to do more nicer things like this, right? Here, if we want to, let's say, so we got the response. Let's say we want to access the first name of the first person. We have raw text. We cannot really do that with raw text. It will be just really cumbersome trying to, from here, trying to find where the first name is. It will be just like a really tough job. What we can do is parse this JSON. And by parsing, we mean taking this raw text and convert it into a JavaScript object that then we can key into. That then we can do results at index 0.
Results at index 0 dash.
I think name that first. So at the moment with raw text, this is not a JavaScript object. It's raw text in JSON format, in JSON structure. But we want to be able to do stuff like this, where we access the first name of the first person, right? For doing that, we need to parse the JSON, and to parsing the JSON will convert. It will take in all this raw text, and it will create an object for us, a JavaScript object that then we can manipulate. We can add more keys. We can read the keys, etc. Or the properties will be a better name. So let's do that. So for parsing the response, what we have is a function call. So yeah, I want to remove this part. We're not going to do that. The paragraph text. Let's do state. I think I'm going to remove this console log 2. Even this, we saw that this is when the request was finished. Here, in my if statement, once I know that I have the response, I want to parse the content. I'm going to create a variable called let parse response is equal. So this is just a variable. I could have named it anything I want, but I think this is an appropriate name. And here, I want to have the parse response. I don't want the raw text. For parsing the response, and if we know that the response is coming in JSON, we have this handy function that comes from the JSON, all capital, object called parse. Look at what VS Code says about parse. Is expecting a text which will come in as a string. It's expecting optionally a reviver, which I don't know what it is. That's sort of some more advanced technical stuff. But we can see here that that one is expecting the first element, the first argument, which is some text that will come in as a string. It must be a valid JSON string. And then it says, convert a JavaScript object notation, or also known as JSON, converts a JSON string into an object. So in here, that's what parse will do. And then in my string, the string that I want to convert to an actual object is this.response. Now here, let's do console log parse response. And this is, a lot of the time, this step is going to be done for us, the parsing of the response, because it's just so common to find JSON as the response to a network request that some libraries are already built in. If we were using, so there are some libraries that you could use instead of XML HTTP requests. Those libraries, you'll just use them, like let's say there's one library called Axios. We're gonna get to learn that on the next unit. And Axios is a library that allows me to make network requests, right? And in there, the way in which I make a network request is something like axios.get, and then I put the URL. And then Axios, inside, it will identify if the response came back as JSON, it will automatically parse it for me, and this is nice. But here we're seeing if we had to do all that manually, here is what we're doing. Okay, so everyone has this in their JavaScript. We go to our browser, go to the console, click, I have to refresh first. And we get, now we no longer have raw text. Now where we console login here is a JavaScript object. We can see the curly brackets. We can see that we have the familiar, nice feature of Chrome that will allow us to expand. Right? And this is something is very common and is happening sort of behind the scenes, where any information that you're sending or receiving from a server is actually just raw text. And that text, that's why JSON exists, because we want to put that raw text in a format that then we can interpret, right? And in that interpretation, in here is being done by the JSON.parse. Here, like, I could do JSON.parse here just as an example. I'm gonna pass in hello. Oh, I think this might work. No, okay, yeah, this didn't work. It says, syntax error, unexpected token H in JSON at position 0. Unexpected token H is that because, well, this string hello is not a valid JSON string, right? If I pass in, what if I pass in this string? What do you think we're gonna get? Syntax error? Actually, nice little Chrome is already telling you the answer. We get an object. We get an empty object. If we pass in an object that has a key, oh, this is gonna get text. Hello. We get back an object with a property text equal to hello. So JSON.parse is taking in this raw string, interpreting, and giving us back an object if it's a valid string, if it's a valid JSON string. And then in here, I could do like, oops, let a or my obj equal that. So JSON parse my string, and then I could do my obj dot text, and I get only the text. So JSON parse, super handy for taking in a string that comes as a JSON string and turning it into an object. And we could also do the opposite, which is taking an object and turning it into a JSON string. And this, for instance, actually that's a different format, but once we're seeing, when we were sending data with Postman for like the to-dos API, right, that you have to put like owner, text, I don't remember if anything else, and completed, I think. That data that you put into those fields in Postman will get converted to, it will be sent as raw text, and then the server will interpret that data and it will do what you asked it to do. In here, the data that we were sending with Postman was not being converted to JSON. It was being converted to URL encoded. It was sort of a different format, but that's still understandable and parsable. Once we get to send data, which is like this week, that data will be converted to a JSON string behind the scenes, and it will be sent to the browser, to the server, and then the server will see the JSON data coming in as raw text, and he parses it, and then you get back a nice object. So here just as a teaser, for converting an object, a JavaScript object. Remember, like here, this string is raw text, right? This string gets parsed, and it creates an object that gets saved in memory. Like here, this string is not saved anyway. This string is just like here. But if I parse this string, and I parse it into an object, now there is a place in memory that I can find with my object that it actually has a JavaScript object. It's not raw text, it's a JavaScript object. So for turning an object back to a JSON string, we have this other function called stringify. JSON stringify, and I want to stringify my object. We can see that I got back that object that was in memory, that is abstract, that JavaScript can understand. I got it back into a string. So in fact, this could be, what if we do this? This stringify. Oh, you just want to do this. Huh, this is interesting. This is going to be for another time. Anyway, that will be for another time. So we can interpret the data that was coming in as a raw text in a JSON string format. We do JSON.parse, and here we end up with a nice JavaScript object put somewhere in memory. So now here I can say parse data, as we saw. Let me just refresh this. Okay, here. So we have an object with two properties, info and results, and I'm interested only in the first name of the first person. So I need to just key down in this object by saying Parse Response dot results. I'm only interested in the first person. The first person is at index 0. That name. That first. Save that, refresh your page. Now we have the first name of the first person, Benito. And here, because we're getting 10 more every time, we get a different person. Oh, is this an Arabic name? Questions, comments?
Where's this script?
Sorry?
Where's the script?
What do you mean a script?
No. It's just so tiny.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and be back.
Not like you got
You call it.
Okay, let's get back to it. So I'm gonna show you. So once we have the data parsed, then we can basically do anything we want with it. I wanna make a list of users with their first and last name, and I'm just doing that as a demonstration. You later on, I think that shouldn't take us the hour that we have remaining. After that, check out this implementation. See how it works. Make sure that you understand how it works. I'm gonna just show you a simplified version of this, because once we have the data parsing as JSON, that we can access it with JavaScript dot notation, then we can technically do anything with the data. And I don't think that's gonna take us like maybe 20 minutes. Then after that, check out this implementation. See how this will display the information. Okay, so for our simpler version, I just want to create a list, a UL that has list items, and every list item will have the name of the person and their last name, and that's it. Then later on your own, check out what this will do. So, okay, so once we have the data, what we want to do is display the data, right? So for doing that, instead of console logging the name of the first person, I'm going to Parse Response. Actually, I'm going to create another function because now that I have the data, what I want is to display it. And I don't want to display the raw JSON because we already saw that it's ugly. So for this thing, I wanna outsource. I could do that here. You see how I created the p tag here and then I appended it. I could do it here, and that'll be fine. But it's better if I take that functionality to a separate function and have a function maybe called display users or render users. That then I can just give my array of users, and that function will take care of creating the p tags, appending to the document. And I could write all this inside of this if statement, but we want to break our programs into smaller components, right? So here I'm just going to create a function call. And at this point, I can do it with ES6. I'm going to call it const render users list. So what I want with this is I'm going to do this implementation, and we're going to see the list. And I want you to after compare it to this other implementation, this other way of doing things. So here, render is just another word for display. Render user list. I want this function to get a list of users as the argument, or the parameter. I'm going to do users. I know that this users parameter will be an array of users that I will pass in, and I know that it's going to be an array because we saw that our response. When we were console logging response, parse response, we see that we have an object with two keys. One of them is results, and inside result is an array with 10 objects where every object represents a user. So I know that I have an array in my response. I have an array of users. So that is what I intend to pass in here to my function. Now, once I have, so let's do this. Let's do like console log users. So here, so my render user list for now is just going to console log. But here, once I know that my ready state change is equal to done or number 4, I want to invoke this function. I want to call it render user list, and my function here is expecting an argument. It's expecting for me to pass in something, right? That's what I indicated by doing this. In fact, it's another nice feature of VS Code. When I do render list open parentheses, it even sort of self-documents my code and says, oh, that function is expecting users, something called users, and it can be of any type. It can be an array, it can be an object, it can be a string. But right now, I want this to be, I want to pass in something here, or more technically, I want to pass in my users here. I know that my users, where are my users? Where is the array of users? Let's see. Alessandra, what do you think? What do I need to pass in here so that I pass in the array of users to my render user list function? Parse response. Yes, but parse response is a object that has 2 properties. Yes, I want to pass only my users. I only want to pass the array. I don't need to pass in the entire response. I could if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. So here I'm just going to do parse response that results. So this parse response that results contains an array of users, and that once we get to this part, will be sort of seen to this function, that array of users will be seen as something called users, as a variable called users. So note how here, again, in the onReady state change function, once the request is done, I parse in my response, I convert that raw text into an actual JavaScript object, and then I call my function render user list. My function so far is just going to console log whatever came in, which we call users, and let's see what that is. Save that, refresh here. You click load random users, and we get, what do we get here? Jonathan, what do you think? Correct. Not much rocket science, right? We get an array with objects inside that represent users. So note here that array is in parse response that results. Okay, now once we have the array, what are some of the stuff that we can do with an array? With arrays, what can we do in JavaScript? Joanne? Did everyone hear that? A little bit louder? You can loop over the array to visit every single element. And we want to loop over the array to create an li element that will contain the first name of the person and the last name. And then that content we can display to the user because it's more, it's human readable basically, HTML. The purpose of HTML is to display information to the user in a readable format. So okay, let's do that. Let's loop over the array. So we can do that with a regular for loop. Let's do for let users user of users. So this is this the for of loop, which is really handy. We're looping over the users array, and on every iteration we get the value of at every index under something called user. So here, if I console log user here, the single user, I refresh my page, I reload, and I'm console logging 10 times every single user. Why is it a 10 times, even though I never said, while I less or equal to array.length? Janesh? Because the end, wait, say that again? The query, what do you mean by that? Oh, I see, yes, you're talking about the URL that is getting 10. Yes, that and because, well, that array has only 10 elements, has the 10 elements that we ask for, right? And then the nice thing about the for of loop is that I don't have to do let I equal 0 while I is less than array.length, or in this case users.length, I++. I could just use the for of, which takes away all that, and it knows, the for of knows that once there is no more elements to visit, it will just stop. In the traditional for loop, we have to tell it specifically when to stop, right? Okay, and then so here I'm iterating over the users, and what do I want to do for every user? Create an element. So let's call I want to create a list item element. I'm going to call it li, or it could be something like user li is equal to document that create element, and I want to create an li element that, and then in here, let's just do user li dot inner text is equal to, so I want the inner text of the li to have the user's first name and last name. I'm going to do that by doing user. So here in the user variable that was created here by the for loop, I have every single user object. So here I can just access the name property that first, because we just saw that those objects that are inside of the array have a name property here, have a first, last, and title sort of sub-properties, or just properties of the name object. So here, user is an object, right? It has a bunch of properties. You have cell phone, DOB, email, gender, and inside of that object we have a property called name, which on itself is already another object. So here we can see that name starts with curly bracket. That means name itself, the name property of the user object, is an object, and then we can just keep sort of drilling down by adding the dot notation after something. In here, we want to drill down into the name property, and I'm only interested in the first name of this name property. So first name, but I also want the last name, so I'm going to do string concatenation here to add a space, and the user name, or user that name that last. So questions, comments, what is it, anything that's confusing from this part? iterating over the array of users, for each one creating an li element and setting the inner text of that li element to have the first and last name of the user. Yes, Douglas?
You may be going there, but you also have to create an unordered or ordered list of houses.
That's a good point, yes. Li elements should always be inside UL or OL elements. We could put them raw like that, just like the li elements in the body, but it's just not good practice. Lis should always be children of UL or OL, which are unordered list and ordered list, respectively. So yeah, that's what we want to do next. So maybe let's do that like next. So actually, let's go onto the browser, see what we have. Click this, nothing. I can see that if I go to network requests, my network requests are still firing, so that's good. At least that part is not broken. And here, well, let's go back to the console. And here, I'm not seeing anything in the screen. Why is it that? Brianna? We're never appending the allies that we're creating, right? So first, maybe let's create a UL first, an unordered list. And I want to create only one. That's why I'm going to put this outside of my loop. Because if I put it inside of my loop, then I will be creating a new unordered list every time. I want to create multiple list items, but I only want to have one UL. So I'm going to do let UL. I'm going to do like users UL, a little bit more descriptive, equal to document that create element UL, like that. So here I created a UL element, and now as Brianna said, we need to append the LIs to something. As I said, we can append the LIs to the body, and that'll work. That will show you the information, but that will not be good HTML standards. Michael? Oh, maybe you're right. Let's look at that. Michael is saying that maybe the HTML already has a list on it. Maybe we just need to grab it instead of creating one. Index HTML. There we go. So it's already made. So instead of creating it, what can we do? Call it, grab it, do query selector. Yeah, so let's grab this one instead. Let's grab it by ID. So instead of creating in here, what do I need to change here? Instead of document query, instead of document create element, we're going to use document query selector. We're going to pass in an ID here. IDs are pound, I think. Yes. And then we're going to use the ID from this one, user list camel case. You guys remember it? Google recommends hyphens instead of camel case. So I'm just going to change that. I changed this to user-list. Before it was user camel case list. Make that change yourself too. The ID, I changed the ID of the UL. Instead of camel case, now it's user-list. Make sure that you have that. Everyone change their ID? Yeah. Okay, go back to the JS. I use that ID on my query selector. And here, users UL, I will have my user list. Now, last step here in the for loop, for every user, I'm creating an li element. I'm adding the inner text to be the name, the first name and last name of that person. The last step that I want to do is append my li element to my list, to my UL. We will do that by saying, where do we want to append? I want to append to the users list. That append child. And what do I want to append? I want to append my user list item. Now, what happens once I click the button? Thumbs up if you say it's going to show a list of all the users, a bulleted list of the users. Thumbs up if you think it's going to do that. Cool. Okay, thumbs down if you say, we're not going to see a bulleted list, we're not going to see anything. Okay, there's some votes on the other case too. Let's refresh. Oh. I was not expecting that, but it was because I forgot. I forgot that we used query selector. I thought we were still creating the element. You were.
Don't worry, I got that for you.
Yep.
I got it for you. I don't know how I got it.
So yeah, so then we have our list of names. Now we're displaying the users. We're only displaying a subset of the information. Maybe we want to display more. Like with this, like if you think about it, with every user that you have here, you could get as fancy as creating something like this. User card design. There are some really cool user cards. Yeah, here. You could, with a user, you could create a small card on HTML that looks like this, right? Or like this. So with that information that we have users. Now we have the data, and now we know HTML and CSS. Now we could create profile photos or profile. Just profiles for our users, right? Because we have all this data. We have, well, maybe we don't have likes and photos, but we have a lot of information that describes the user, right? And then how you display that information, that is up to you, up to the needs of your application. And these are just some ideas. So, okay, was everyone able to see the bulleted list?
No.
Where you see the bullets though.
I see bullets.
So that means that you probably have a mistake here. And what about here? Do you also have the here user list dot inner text? There you go. So, what would happen if I click the button again? Try it out. It gets 10 more. And it just keeps getting 10 more. Now, your task is to remove all the random users when I click this button. So let's see if we have. Yeah, and also, so once you do remove the users, also like the solution is here in the lecture notes, but try to figure it out. After that, look at this implementation. You can replace. Oh, here we can see that in the lecture we call that function that I call render users. We call it add users to DOM. That's another name, right? And it's going to do the same. Well, it's going to do it in a different way. This seems to be displaying more information that I'm displaying currently. So here, for the next 20 minutes, let's do. Try to remove all the users once you click the other button, and then plug in this information, this JavaScript into your JavaScript file, see how that changes the result, what you will see in the screen, and try to make sense of it. Like try to see if, how does it work, right? How is it that it's creating that visual appearance in? And then let's do that until let's just take the last 5 minutes at the end before 1. I'm gonna remind you to do the exit ticket. But for now, let's just do the remove users and the checking this out. So feel free to work in pairs with whoever is sitting next to you or otherwise. I'm gonna be, if you have questions, raise your hand and we can take care.
Which means this option, this game here, it's not really an option, it's not really the option that was stuck. This here is no event. Let's find why did you didn't say that how would that affect your so how would that affect your JavaScript? So it doesn't find anything, it returns null. Therefore, user null was null, and oh, it does This is the wait. So you have two one is you have up. You don't want to, right? That's true, yeah. I mean, they're still using the bullet points. No, but that's because you have the HTML, not the oh, you said the UL. Yeah, this is that's something, right? That's true. It does, it's not rude, you know. Well, those items, you are removing these items. Those items are not there. The list is there. You want the list to remain because then you forget what the list is called. The notes and this item. That's a good question. It's sort of a sample. There's no Yeah.
Okay, let's take the last 7 minutes to do the exit ticket. After that, we will be working in the lab, which is just more practice. Make sure that if you have questions, ask them. Don't just type in code that you don't understand. And I'm open to questions.
Why didn't it want us to use the camel case?
Oh, so
Is
is
it
that
just-
wrong or right? Is that Google recommends dashes instead of camel
It's
case.
just so like,
It's just to
we would like you to do this.
yes, it's just yeah. So
Okay, that's what I thought you that's what you made it sound like, but I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
yeah.
Like
You can still
if I'm just used to using camel case and I just like dive into it, I'm not thinking, I should always be thinking, but if I'm not thinking and I just use it, I'm
Yeah, it
sure
will
it's
still
not
work.
gonna, like,
It will still
Okay.
work. Yep.
Mhm.